Well, what I noticed and what began to emerge from the research is that the way that a leader uses their own intelligence, and I'm going to use that term broadly, meaning their knowledge, their insight, their skill, their talent, the way they use that really affects the way other people can use their intelligence. And a leader can either be a multiplier of intelligence. In many ways, they're using their intelligence as a tool for innovation and growth, for ideation. Like people around these leaders are at their best, they're at their smartest. Um, or a leader can use their intelligence in a way that shuts down ideas and energy and capability, and people tend to hold back and play it safe and like do their safest thinking and their sort of most tepid kind of work around these leaders.
Liz, you are very welcome to the ScaleX Insider podcast. Delighted and thrilled to have you on the show today.
Oh, well, I am delighted to be here. I look forward to it.
Yeah, likewise, you are located, as we've discovered, in the center of the tech scaling universe. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. To kick off, our vision is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small and medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So, Liz, what does scaling with purpose mean to you?
Ooh, well, I think I began my career at a company that was scaling with purpose. I started at Oracle when they were still young and on this huge growth trajectory. And so I've spent really my whole career looking at companies doing this. And I think if I had to boil down what I've observed, it's about being thoughtful, not just about the business you want to create, but the culture that you want to create that forms a foundation of it. And to get the right business, you have to have built the right culture. And that takes forethought and intentionality. And to have the right culture, you need the right kind of leadership. So I think it's being thoughtful about how you're leading and the value system that you're building around you, and whether that platform is strong enough to hold a big business.
It's interesting. The word intention and intentionality has come up a lot recently. I don't know why that is, but again, it's that deliberate intention of creating the culture that actually supports a business to scale with purpose. And you mentioned that you started your career in Oracle, rising, of course, to the role of vice president. You've witnessed that scaling journey. Incredible. Can you share with our listeners who may not be familiar or as familiar with your work and your background, why now have you decided to devote your career through the Wiseman Group to supporting leaders in unlocking the potential within their people, which is the third principle of our 10 principle ScaleX framework, which is why I love your work. What is it about your career that has led you to this point where you're devoting your now entire career to supporting leaders to really amplify the talent of others?
Mm. Well, I think, boy, if I had to say there was something I was good at, so I didn't build my career around a big plan or an intention as much as it was an outgrowth of just something I was good at. And I think what I am good at is paying attention. Uh, and I guess it's a form of intentionality. It's an intentionality around the present as much as it's being intentional about the future. And, I joined this young, rapidly growing company, and everyone around me was smart and driven and very type A, as they said. I mean, I think like their initial sorting for candidates for the company was like type A, type B, type A, and they just grabbed from the type A pile. So, and and they had a really interesting recruiting strategy around hiring, you know, top of the class from these top universities in, computer science and tech. And so I found myself working with all of these like smarties, like everyone around me was so smart. And I suppose I could have gone down this imposter syndrome path of like, oh, gee, I don't know if I should be here. I don't know if I'm smart enough. I don't know. I just fortunately didn't. But what I did is I went down this path of observation and appreciation. And I remember being in my early 20s, feeling so lucky that I worked with all these really brilliant people. And I would be like, man, every day at work, I feel like I'm getting a PhD in world history. And everyone was so smart and interesting and accomplished. And I watched. In many ways, I became like a genius watcher, just studying all of these brilliant people. And because the company's growing really fast, and because the industry is new, and this is absolutely a story of scale, the people that are getting thrown into management positions are not experienced managers from the industry. Larry Ellison was creating this industry. It was all novel. And so they were just taking, inexperienced people, throwing them into management. I was one of those people. And I watched all of these really smart people get thrown into management. And I noticed that while they were really smart, not everyone around them, not everyone who worked for them, reported to them, got to be smart. And I started to notice this difference. And pick a colleague, let's call him Sunir. I'd be like, I know Sunir to be brilliant. He's quick, he's thoughtful, he's outspoken. Then I would watch one of my colleagues and I would say, why is he so reserved around this leader? Why is he holding back? Why is he not saying anything? Why isn't he taking ownership? And then I would watch the same person perform, if you will, under a different leader in a meeting with a different kind of a boss. And I'm like, okay, well, that's my buddy Sunir. Like he's sharp, he's witty, he's like quick, he's volunteering for stuff. And I'm like, what's going on with the leaders in this organization? And why is it that some leaders seem to squelch intelligence? Like they work really hard to hire smart people, but they seem to underutilize the talent they worked so hard to hire. And then I would see other leaders who were equally brilliant, but people around them were active and thoughtful and curious and assertive and accountable. And I'm like, something's going on here. And this was something I just watched play out over years. And it wasn't until I finally left the company, started doing some coaching work, executive coaching, that I thought, oh, this isn't just an Oracle phenomenon. I see it all across tech, which is kind of the hub of where I live, a lot of tech execs. And then I started seeing it's actually an everywhere problem. And that's when I decided that it needed to be researched and studied properly. And that really began, I suppose, my life's work trying to understand how to utilize talent at its fullest and how to grow organizations, not by just shoveling in new talent, but how to grow organizations by really using and developing the talent you already have. That's how
You
I ended up here. I just paid attention.
you have set the stage beautifully. We say and lean heavily on the Zig Ziglar quote, you don't build a business, you build people and people build the business. And you know, thankfully for the rest of us, you were this champion observer. You had the patience to observe and then post your article career reflect and be forensic to discern what was actually going on. And you have this distinguishing phrase in your book, your wonderful book called Multipliers. For those who are listening, you won't be able to see me holding this up. I encourage you all to go and grab a copy of this book. It is wonderful, and I'd love to do a mini masterclass of this today. But you talk about and to Sinear, the difference between genius and genius makers, which ultimately is the essence of multipliers and diminishers. So for those not familiar with this concept of leaders being multipliers and other leaders being diminishers, let's just start off at the ground floor here. What is this concept? And let's dig in then to and unpack what are the characteristics of the multipliers, and then contrast that with some diminishing traits. So
Mm.
let's kick off. What are those multipliers, and how would we notice them within ourselves and within our organizations?
Mm. Well, what I noticed and what began to emerge from the research is that the way that a leader uses their own intelligence, and I'm going to use that term broadly, meaning their knowledge, their insight, their skill, their talent. The way they use that really affects the way other people can use their intelligence. And a leader can either be a multiplier of intelligence. In many ways, they're using their intelligence as a tool for innovation and growth, for ideation. Like people around these leaders are at their best, they're at their smartest. Um, or a leader can use their intelligence in a way that shuts down ideas and energy and capability, and people tend to hold back and play it safe and like do their safest thinking and their sort of most tepid kind of work around these leaders. And maybe in some, it's leaders who either energize their teams or enervate their teams. And what I found is that these leaders do a number of things very, very differently. And those are really the multiplier disciplines. And it's how they manage talent. Um, the diminisher tends to be an empire builder, where the multiplier tends to be a talent magnet. It's how they manage and the climate they create. It's for a diminisher, they tend to create a tense climate, whereas the multiplier creates an intense climate. Um, where people feel safe, they feel included and they belong and they've got some space to think, but they also have some pressure to perform at their best. And it's usually in that intensity that people tend to do their best work. The third difference is how they set direction. The diminisher tends to tell people what to do. They're a bit of a know-it-all, whereas the multiplier is the challenger. Ask, they ask people what's possible. What do you think we can do? What can we do? What should we do? The fourth difference is how they make decisions. The diminisher tends to be the decision maker, whereas the multiplier tends to be the debate maker. And then the last difference was really how they drive for results, how they get things done. And the diminisher tends to be the micromanager. And they get it done, but they get it done themselves. They're getting it done through brute force in many ways. Whereas the multiplier tends to be the investor. They're giving other people ownership, but also the accountability that goes with it. And those are the differences that I found. I found that these diminishing leaders were getting less than half of people's available intelligence, which it's hard for me to not want to get on a soapbox here, but I mean, it's just sort of a crime on a couple levels. One is it's an incredible waste of money and head count, but it's also, a waste of talent, and it creates an environment where people, are frustrated, exhausted, they disengage. Um, but we find they're getting less than half of people's available intelligence, where the multipliers are getting virtually all of it. And then people say, it's actually, they got more than 100% from me because I was growing so fast and learning so much that my capability, my intelligence really is increasing. So we found that there was this 2x difference. And I was shocked. Brendan, I was shocked because I started this like going, okay, I can see that they get more, but X. And actually, you find in parts of the world where there's a lot of what the anthropologists would say is power distance, a lot of hierarchy in the culture, that 2X difference goes to a 3X difference. Um, so that's kind of the second thing we found is not just do they, operate in different ways, they get very different levels of capability in. And I think the third and maybe the most important thing that I found in this research was that most of the diminishing wasn't coming from the tyrannical, intimidating, micromanaging, bossy, bully, know-it-all kind of diminisher. Most of the diminishing was coming from what I call the accidental diminisher. Really good intentions, trying to be a great boss, think they're doing it all right, and finding that they're still having the same diminishing effects. And that's where it gets a little bit more nuanced and subtle. But that's the essence.
It's so profound, and it's shocking when you think that the latest statistics cite access to talent as one of the single greatest impediments as to why SMB leaders don't achieve scale. And we have in the latest Gallup survey 80% of people in the workforce disengaged. We've got disengagement, and we've got coupled with the fact that actually people who are in the workplace are only unlocking or only using 50% of their talent, yet that's in the backdrop of those who are seeking to scale citing access to talent as a great impediment. It isn't the availability of talent, I would suggest, given what your research suggests here, it's actually we're not leveraging the wonderful talent and all of the talent that we have within our existing organizations. So there are a number of things that I'd like to just unpack a little bit further. One is the challenge of letting go. We see it in our work. The startup leader who graduates to becoming the CEO of a scale up, and to Marshall Goldsmith, who I had on the podcast a number of episodes back, to his work, what got you here won't get you there. Seems to be a multiplier mindset that we as scaling CEOs need to adapt, that's different from this kind of startup environment where we've got our hands on everything. What I'm hearing from you is that we must let go. There's the difference between kind of empowering teams, which is this multiplying mindset, versus disempowering teams, which is this diminishing mindset. Let's speak to this. How do we let go such that we can comfort ourselves that things are still being done, that we're still on the right trajectory, and at the same time empower and kind of act as multipliers to the talent that we already have? What do we need to do as leaders? Because I suspect that no one intentionally sets out, very few will set out to disempower their team. Certainly no one who has ambition to scale, but I think there's this risk, certainly, of becoming an accidental diminisher. So how do we navigate this and mitigate the risk of becoming an accidental diminisher as a result of maybe hanging on too tightly, it sounds like?
Yeah, yeah. And, someone who has started a company myself, and it's a company based in my research and intellectual property. Like, I understand like this tension of like, how do I let go? What if so I don't need to take everyone through all the stress of this, but I have experiences myself. I think it has everything to do with how we think about letting go. And, and instead of like giving it up, which I think is hard to do, particularly if you're a founder, I think I would think about it more about like bringing people in. Like, how do I, instead of like let go of this thing that's my baby, how do I bring people in? And maybe just saying the word baby kind of makes me think about like, when something is your baby, I've had babies, I've had four babies, and like the idea of just like letting someone else take the baby and like having like, but like bringing people into the circle of people that that baby would trust. Like, hey, be part of this baby's life, be part of the village that's going to raise that baby. Like it's so much more comforting to say, I'm going to bring in other caretakers who will love this child and help me raise this child. Like that's a lot easier than here's my baby, don't screw it up, you know?
I
Um,
love this. And this is, sorry, the first time that we've had this in almost 200 episodes of the podcast. The metaphor of giving your baby up is one that is very commonly used, but I've never heard of actually reframing this to say, well, let's actually invite people in so that rather me having to care for the developmental needs of this baby, aka our new company, let's invite others who will share in the nourishment and the enrichment of with all of their ideas how this can be done for the betterment of this baby, this company. I've never heard it framed like that. That is such an important reframe. So I think it's important just to kind of to call that out. Uh, so that's important. That reframe. What do we need to do as leaders to actually become aware of the fact that we might be diminishing in the first instance? What are some of the kind of the warning signs here that our behavior is diminishing behavior as opposed to multiplying behavior?
mm, like if there was one word, it would be micromanaging. Like if you find yourself micromanaging because you can't let go, or because people just know that you're going to pull it back. See, I find that actually most leaders don't have trouble letting go of something or bringing others in. Most people have a hard time not yanking it back. Like we know we have to delegate, which is like, okay, you know what? Here, it's yours. And then you're like, well, it's yours until you screw it up, and then it's mine. Or it's yours until it looks like you're going to screw it up, and then it's mine too. Or it's yours until I just get uncomfortable with what's going on, and then I'm going to pull it back. And, I found this early in my career where, I was delegating, I was trying to be a good leader, but yet I would find myself at the end of the day, everyone else has gone home and it's dark and I'm still at work, and my to-do list is longer at the end of the day than it started because things have come back to me. People have brought me their problems like, okay, boss, this one got hard. Here you go. Okay, this person's difficult. You know what? Like, why don't you deal with it? And I'm like, oh, my problem wasn't delegating work. My problem was not accepting it back. And I think that's what it taught me. Like, a leader's job is to get work to people who can help um, perform and care for it the way that you would, and to keep it there. So micromanaging is an indication when you're like constantly in the weeds on things, bungee, like stuff that comes back to you, or when you're the bungee boss and you're like bunging in and out in unproductive ways. Like I'm all over it. Okay, now I'm back. Now I'm all over it again. Like that creates chaos for people around you. And when, micromanaging creates chaos, bunging work creates chaos, creates chaos. And when people experience chaos, their natural reaction is to slow down and to stop. Like things are uncertain, things are messy. I don't know if Liz owns it or if she's given this to me. I don't know if Liz wants me to speak up or if she wants me to just like, nod my head and agree with her. And so when people are confused, they just slow down and they stop. And other indicators that you might be having a diminishing effect or accidental diminishing effect would be silence. You ask a question, even a well-meaning question like, well, what do you think we should do? And you get silence or compliance. Like I know this is from my personal life. And I know when my husband says to me, just tell me what you want me to do. Like I'm happy to do it, just tell me. Usually that's a sign that there's been some diminishing going on because when people are like just like I don't want to think about it, just it's just better off if you just like boss just tell me rather than people thinking it through themselves. Of course, any disengagement, resentment are usually signs. And that resentment goes both ways. It might be when your staff is starting to disengage and maybe show signs of resentment, but it's true when you, as the leader, the founder, the CEO, the senior executive, when you are starting to feel resentment, like it all rests with me. And why is everyone else like chill and I'm the one that feels frantic? That's usually, I have a practice I use. Is that whenever I find myself with personnel problems, staff problems, employee problems, problems in work, I just tell myself, like, and it usually takes me a minute or two because my first minute or two, I'm kind of pissed, I'm frustrated, I'm like, ah. And then I tell myself, like, you've created this.
Yeah.
Like, you have created this problem either by being too helpful, being too supportive, jumping in too quickly, like whatever problem exists, I have created it in some way. And then that helps me unravel the way that I have perhaps diminished or accidentally diminished people on my team.
I I love that the fact that actually you're not pointing the finger at anyone else, any diminishing behavior, or any impediment or impairment of your team's work as a result of what you become aware of as diminishing behavior rests solely with you. You take that responsibility and you put your hand up. What's the next steps? Because this is really practical. So if I see signs where uh, my team are asking me for a directive to tell them what to do. It suggests that actually they're uncomfortable with getting this wrong because I've stepped all over it in the past where I have delegated, I have let go, but actually I'm all over it then in terms of jumping up and down if something isn't done to the standard that I would do that, and it gets to the point where they become so frightened of getting this wrong that they just ask for an absolute explicit direction in terms of the work. The silence where they've stopped speaking up when you've invited them to do that, and if we see that they're just completely disengaged. So if I'm noticing those things, that's not the fault of those people within my team. It solely rests with me, and I think that's so incredibly important, and it highlights significant awareness. What do I do next? What's the next step for me to in some way begin to repair the damage left as a result of my diminishing behavior as a leader?
Mm. Well, I think it's understanding our accidental diminisher tendencies. And these are the ways that, I mean, we know what diminishing looks like. Diminishing looks like making all the decisions, creating stress, intimidating, telling people what to do, micromanaging. We know what that looks like. And when we find ourselves in that, we probably should ask ourselves, like, why am I doing this? What is the assumption behind this behavior? But the more prevalent cause of people shutting down, doing the minimum, or utilizing their intelligence and talent is accidental diminishing. And these are the things we do with the very best intentions. And I'm going to rattle off. Let me do all nine. There are more than nine, but nine's about what I can. It's about what I can remember. But again, these are things we do with the very best of intentions. I do these things. People get promoted for doing these things, but here they are. The idea fountain, creative, love, love an innovative environment. So they toss out ideas, and I'm going to like toss out ideas. Other people will pick up on this as a brainstorm, and they'll toss out ideas, and then we're going to have this like big bowl of ideas to work from. But what tends to happen is like the boss tosses out ideas and other people go, okay, I'll do that. And you haven't really started an idea party. It's just sort of like a death march to like get something done, but it's chaotic. It's more like a wild goose chase, really, because people are just chasing the boss's ideas. And probably, Brenda, here's the important thing behind this is the diminisher are people who are like overplaying their power. The accidental diminisher is someone who, for the most part, underestimates their power. They're not power mongers. They're not like, this is my idea, do it. They don't understand that you just tossing out an idea as like, oh, it's just like a playful suggestion. You don't realize that a committee formed and there's a bunch of people working on that. Unquestioningly, like, we don't realize that people take us so seriously. There was a CEO of a big health system here in town, and he said, "Oh, I'm just this like kid from New Hampshire. I'm just a country kid from New Hampshire." And he's a CEO of like a 50,000 person organization. And I'm like, Warner, you are not like a kid from New Hampshire to the 50,000 people who work for you. You are the mayor of their town. Like, you are like everything to them. And like so many really good people don't understand their power. And I actually think you really don't have you shouldn't be in a leadership role if you aren't willing to understand power and your
Oh,
power.
so I'm ticking
It's
the
shameful,
first
I
one.
think.
I'm ticking the first one because I've witnessed this happening in our own organization and previous organizations in which I've led, and it's that just throwing things out, wanting to kind of brainstorm, wanting to bounce ideas, or just empty your head. But unwittingly, you've got people now running around trying to implement what you've just thrown out there to kind of offload it. Uh, I, in fact, there's a very specific example recently, and I can see this. So I'm ticking the first one. You're going to make me very uncomfortable, I suspect, going through these, Liz.
I'll keep going, but that first one is one I do all the time. And Brendan, you hit the nail on the head when you said like to empty our heads. Like this is how I do it. It's like I've got all these ideas and I kind of just want to talk to someone. In fact, I have this fun little right over here. Let me grab it. This is like what I do. This is where ideas kind of go to rest is, I've got all these like ideas. I put them on sticky notes
That's brilliant.
and it's like my holding tank to keep other people safe from all of my ideas. And some of those like make it through the test of time where I'm like,
Yeah.
it's a good idea. I should talk to someone about it. But a lot of them, I just, I take them off and I stick them in here and I keep them just in case, I don't know, I have like a brain injury and I can't come up with anything new. But like what
I
I've
love
learned,
that. My equivalent of that is my WhatsApp. So I WhatsApp messages to myself rather than WhatsApping our innovation groups or innovation forums. So when it's really bubbling up, I just offload the message to myself and then I replay those messages, later on in the week and decide whether they should go somewhere or not. In the moment, I always feel I need to tell this to someone, and I found that that was diminishing behavior, and it was often, we know it was often outside of work hours. Typically, if I'm on my bike at the weekend, an idea comes and I pull the bike over and I wanted to kind of just voice message somebody at that point in time, or some of our group channels. And I thought it just wasn't helpful for anyone. It was helpful for me in the moment to offload it. So now I kind of offload it to myself in my own WhatsApp channel. And I love your posted box there. So I'm going to get a version of that, a manual version as well. So brilliant.
Yeah, I've had like one idea that was in the box that I held in this holding tank for like 5 years. And it's actually now something we're doing because it's appropriate for what we're doing. But it was such a good idea. I was like, I really want to like phone someone. I want to talk about this, but I have learned to be a mature adult. Like, and I hate that because I want to be a kid. I want to have fun. And so I'm like, no, don't distract people with your random musings. Like, okay, so this is just one. There's a
That just resonates so strongly. And I think I interviewed Joe Polish a number of years back, and Joe came out with this line that all founders, all entrepreneurs are adulterous when it comes to new things. We constantly chase the latest idea and shiny new things, and so we need to be mindful that that behavior is diminishing behavior. Okay, number two.
Okay, before we go into number two, I can't resist telling you about this was a tech company here, scaling, wildly creative founder, very well known in the public space in tech, and everyone knew him. And I talked to his chief technology officer, and he said, "Oh, I probably spend 50% of my time, if not more, running around the organization, having to calm people down and tell people that they don't have to take action on this thing that he just said. Because he's like, we should do this, we should do this, we should port a thing to this. Well, we really should go into this market and that market. And it was creating chaos for everyone else. And so, like, imagine your CTO having to spend half of his time erasing like the chaos that you've created in the organization. And then when the CEO actually wants people to take action, people might be like, well, is this one of the crazy harebrained ideas that we should ignore? And okay, number two, this one's about energy, the always on leader, charismatic often, energetic. And of course, they think they're motivating their teams and they think their energy is infectious. Like, whoa, this is great. It's amazing. But what's it like to work around the always on leader, the human being without an off switch? People say it's enervating, it's exhausting, it's draining, and they tend to shut down people around them. They exhaust other people, but we learn to tune these people out. What do you do with the human that doesn't have an off switch? Yeah, these are people you don't want to make eye contact with, right?
And herein lies another challenge because the vast majority of entrepreneurs have some form of ADHD. What makes them brilliant in terms of that energy, in terms of igniting, starting, and creating a business. Ultimately, what I'm hearing becomes a diminishing trait if not managed.
Yes. And I'll try to go quickly through the rest of these, but like the idea is each one of these is a positive trait. And you do often see them in founders and they have a place. They have a place. It's not about shutting down these capabilities. It's not like, gee, Liz, you can't be a creative thinker. Like creativity is one of my strengths. Um, but it's about using and deploying and tempering your strengths to where like you get to engage them, but you've created enough space. You've left room for other people to engage theirs.
What I'm hearing, the context is critical here, knowing when to leverage these 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 strengths. But I I'm fascinated. Every strength has a shadow side,
Mhm.
and what I'm hearing, the ability to create new ideas, to actually bring energy to these ideas, to create something, to get something off the ground. I mean, these are all founder traits, but certainly when it comes to scaling a business where um, inspiring others, unlocking the talent in others, building processes and systems that are directed and aligned towards a vision that is long term, that's not going to change next week or next month because of the latest whim, is so critically important. So again, awareness it seems to be the key word here, and understanding the context of when you leverage what were strengths, but often in the context of a scaling organization can become diminishing behaviors.
Yeah, and it's absolutely how you use your strength. And as you mentioned, I kind of live here in the land of founders and tech founders. And one of the things I've seen, because there are a lot of like genius heads of these organizations and founders, and I think the truth is you can start a company with genius, and you often need like high levels of energy and ideation and genius and risk taking, all that. Like you can start a company with genius, but to build something enduring, you need genius makers at the helm of that organization. And it's not to say that they can't also be geniuses. And by geniuses, I don't mean someone who's like mental level, like, IQ. I just mean someone who has this form of brilliance. But it's like you need someone who uses that intelligence in a way that provokes ideation and energy in other people. It's all about how you use your own talent, whether you end up with a talent-rich organization or a top-heavy organization. Okay, let's go back to these accidental diminisher tendencies. Maybe I'll just kind of rattle them off quickly. The rescuer really cares about their people, hates to see people struggle. When people are struggling with the tough people's of work, they jump in and they offer a hand of help. The pace setter, who's leading by example, and they want their organization to be more digitally savvy, more customer centric. So they're showing people like this is what I want everyone to do. So I'm going to do it in earnest and in abundance. But they get out ahead of their team so far that other people become spectators, not followers. They're like, and you've got pace setter tendencies when people say, "Oh yeah, like my boss, like she's amazing." Because who really should think that they're amazing, when they walk out of your office? I mean, it's nice when they think you're amazing, but they probably should walk out of your office feeling like
They're amazing.
that they're amazing. And those are the people we like to work for. I know that feeling of walking out of like my boss's office and going like, wow, like he thinks I'm incredible. Like I feel. Yeah, so it's very different. Okay, well, the rapid responder, agile. They're on it. They're quick to respond to a WhatsApp, a Slack, a text. They're quick to jump on things, but because they move so fast, nobody else has to. The protector is the rescuer who is moved upstream of the problem because they're just keeping people out of danger and difficult situations. Like, oh, this one's tough. I'll handle it. This is a high stakes opportunity. I better do it. But the problem is they become like a banyan tree and they provide comfort and shade, but nothing grows under them. You can't grow a company when you've got a bunch of protectors doing all the hard work. You've got to push hard effort out into the organization. Let's see, the optimist. This is another one of mine. Positive can-do leaders who see victory and possibilities and believe in people, but they often overlook the struggle it takes to get there. The perfectionist, the person who loves to get it exactly right. But like, what's it like to work for a perfectionist? You feel like it's never good enough. It always gets undone. And you actually learn to give them incomplete work because you're like, they're gonna finish this off. They're gonna change it anyway. So She seems to enjoy it, so I'll just give her my drafts and she can polish it up. And then a strategist, big, bold thinkers, visionaries, but they do maybe so much of the big picture thinking that nobody else has to really think about how this all comes together. Everyone's just doing their piece, stuck in their silos, and the boss is like, why is everyone like stuck in their silos? Like maybe instead of completing the picture, maybe the leader should frame it, put some parameters in place, but leave lots of holes, lots of missing pieces that the team has to figure out. It's kind of like frame the puzzle and then leave it on the table for people to come in and put their piece together.
I've ticked so many of these.
Mm,
Who would be a leader? It's this is it's so incredibly challenging because context is critical, and a heightened level of awareness is so critical, and and understanding others is so critical. It's and herein lies the fact that less than 1% of small and medium-sized enterprises ever achieve scale. Let's let's move positively to those behaviors that are really kind of easy wins for us. They're low-hanging fruits. You know, if people are listening to this now and can identify quite a number of those traits within themselves when they kind of reflect back on the last week, month, 6 months. What what can we do kind of practically to begin acting more like multipliers and moving away from this diminishing behavior?
mm. Well, do you want the tried and true and potentially hard way, or do you want the easy way?
uh, is there an easier version that's still tried and true?
I think there is. Maybe let me start with some tried and true practices. And these are all starting points. I think they're actually easy. And then I want to get to the easy way and maybe even the lazy leader's way to be a good multiplier. Um, it's a way that has worked for me, and I've seen this work for so many people. But
I
okay,
love
here,
this. Let's go through tried and true, easy, and then lazy.
yeah. So some of the tried and true are and they're all shifts, little mini shifts. The first is to shift out of the mode of telling and operate in the mode of asking. Not asking for people to do things. Hey, will you do this? Um, but asking questions that get other people thinking, asking questions that shift the burden of thinking from you to them, and asking questions that focus the energy and intelligence of your team on the right problems. You know, Brendan, really at the top of our conversation, talked about letting go. And then we talked about like maybe bringing people in to help raise the baby. But I actually think when you look at what the best leaders do, they hold certain things loosely and they hold other things tightly. And there are things that we need to hold really tight control of, like what you want people to work on might be one of those. How they get that done, that might be something you hold loosely that someone else can grab onto tightly. So it's not about like multiplier leadership is not hippie leadership. It's not, I come from California, so I'm prone to sort of like hippie kind of thinking, but it's not like, hey, do whatever you want, like be brilliant, make a contribution, just like, hey, it's everybody's company. No, it's like as a founder and a leader, you have a clear vision or a goal, and like those are things you might hold tightly. Values you might hold very tightly. How we treat our customers, you might hold tightly. But like how we package the box, like that might be something you hold loosely, how we choose those goals or what markets we pursue first. Like that might be something you're like loosely. And so a question is a way to like get people focused on the right things, but ask them, well, how do you think we can enter that market? Like, what would it take to double our business with this customer over the next year? How would we enter into this market but not lose our stronghold in that market? But all of it is saying, I want these things done, but I need your ideas and your energy for how we do those kinds of things. Like hold some things tightly, hold other things loosely. So, number one practice, lead by asking. Again, not asking people to go on errands or do tasks, asking people to share their thinking. Um, let's see, maybe the next one. Uh, Instead of just hiring people for their skills, their, CVs. Maybe as you hire, you look for people's native genius, just the thing they do easily and freely. And it's not that they do it because they were trained to do it or because their job requires them to do it. It's what their brain is built to do. All of us have things like our brain is built to do. And I find that like if you want to scale, figure out what people are going to do, whether it's their job or not, whether you want them to do it or not. Like some people um like are naturally creative. Some people are bridge builders. Some people have other forms of genius that sometimes feel inconvenient, like they find holes in things. They're critics. And you're like, oh, they're such a drag, these people. She's such a Debbie Downer. But it's like, you know what? That's what her brain is good at. Like, put that to work. Okay, here's our plan. Debbie, boom. What are the holes in this? Like, what are the things that we're not thinking about? Because she's going to do it anyway, right? Uh,
Again, it's a beautiful frame or reframe. I've worked with some Debbie Downers in the past, typically from the finance department, who come and dump on you on what you feel is a great idea whenever they tell you all the reasons why it can't be done. And I'm speaking from as someone from a finance background, so it's a lovely reframe. It's actually there's a role for these people. They're naturally inclined towards this type of behavior, but actually this can be leveraged in the context of scaling as long as we understand that's their natural disposition. As if, of course, there's a role for that. So again, the importance of the reframe there. So leveraging people's native genius, and we had the wonderful Gay Hendricks, who wrote the book The Big Leap, of course, who coined the term zone of genius. So really, as multipliers, we want to be seeking out people's uniqueness and understand when they're operating best in their zone of genius. So, yeah, I love that. So, what else?
I'm thinking other things for founders. I think of another one would be making space for mistakes. And, I hear this, as we have mentioned several times here, or I've mentioned, I kind of live right in the heart of Silicon Valley. And, you hear this mantra, fail forward, fail fast, fail. I'm not sure I find it very helpful. I actually think it's not a great business strategy is to just like fail at stuff. I think if you talk to any founder or executive, they're like, well, actually, there's some parts I really need you to get right actually. And I think one of the powerful things a leader can do is to separate the two and to not, do the hippie thing of like, hey, just try it and let's see what happens. But also not to be so risk averse that you can't scale and grow. And so it would be identifying the freeways versus the playgrounds. Now, every business, whether you build mission critical software, you run a hospital, you're a surgeon, or you run a distribution center, every business has some things that have to be done exactly right. And this is where your perfectionist gene might prevail. And you might need to micromanage a little bit. But every single business um, including the military, including the light, the work of surgical teams. They have parts of the work where there is room to experiment and to try new things and to play. These are the playgrounds. And you separate these. You're like, okay, this part of the business, we've got to get exactly right. This is freeway work. Over here, this is playground work. You can try things, be bold, make mistakes. Mistakes will be forgiven. They will be interesting. They will be celebrated. But instead of pretending that this is an innovation fest, like acknowledge the work that is freeway work. I think every organization I've seen that has done this find it absolutely liberating. Okay, here's maybe one of my favorite practices. This was from not a founder, but this was Cisco CEO. He had come in the networking company. They were rapidly growing. They had hired a CEO, so he's kind of their first professional leader. He is making his first executive hire, hiring a man named Doug to run customer support. And he said, so this is John Chambers saying to Doug, when it comes to this part of the business, you get 51% of the vote and 100% of the accountability. And I think this is brilliant leadership. It's brilliant shorthand. It's the shortcut to saying, like, you own it. You're accountable for it. And so I instead of like having a whole conversation about like who owns what, just say, you know what? You get 51% of the vote and 100% of the accountability because it says we trust you. We value your expertise. You are the leader. You are the boss. You are in charge of this. But by holding back 49% of the vote, you're also saying counsel with other people. Take my ideas into consideration. Keep me informed. Be a collaborator, but we're going to back you. Um, and then maybe, so that practice is just give 51% of the vote.
I
Maybe
love that.
another one um, for founders and leaders who've got that sort of bungee tendency. And we talked about it early, like it's one thing to delegate, but then when things tend to go wrong, we tend to take it back. And this is one, instead of taking it back, remember to give the pen back. And this was one I learned from a man named Jay Troy. He was the managing director of McKinsey, the consultancy firm, and he was leading their business in Seoul, Korea. And what he said to me is, Liz, when people are stuck, it's irresponsible not to help, but you've got to remember to hand the pen back. And then he described this meeting, and it was in the wee hours of the morning. It was like 2 in the morning, and this project team has been doing this business transformation study for their most important clients, their biggest clients, a very high stakes project. And they've done the first part of the study, but they want to then get the green light for the second and the lucrative part of the study. And they've got all this data and they're assembled in a room and they're trying to put their pitch together, their presentation for the client for the next day. And the team is struggling and the project leaders up at the board and they got a bunch of ideas, but they don't have the pitch, the message. And they finally turn to Jay, who's the executive sponsor, and he's in the back of the room and he's been listening. He's there to kind of coach. And they've asked if he had any ideas, and he can see they're struggling. And they hand him the pen, like a whiteboard pen. And he comes up and he starts mapping out this presentation, and he can see exactly what needs to happen. It's crystal clear for him. He's been paying attention. So he's mapping out, okay, here's the data, here's the themes, blah, 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 blah. And of course, he wants to finish this off. And of course, they want him to finish this off. It's 2 in the morning. But Jay is such a natural multiplier, and he's just that tendency signaled restraint. And he kind of mapped out maybe the first cells of the presentation, and then he stopped and he said, here are a few ideas, like, let's see what you can do with these. And then he hands the pen back to the project leader. And for me, this has become this metaphor of, yeah, it's okay to help. But like when you help, it's like you've taken the pen, which represents power, ownership, accountability. It's like, who's in charge now? Jay's in charge. And every time you help, you have just taken ownership of this thing, unless you hand the pen back. And so handing the pen back would be saying something like, oh, you know what? Here are a few suggestions. Why don't you see what you can do with it? Or happy to help, but I really, everyone's still looking to you as the leader of this. Like, hey, I'm on the sidelines. Like you're out on the pitch. Like, let me know if you need me, but we all look to you. So it's like reminding, again, it's one thing to put other people in charge. It's a whole nother level of leadership to keep them in charge.
That is so powerful. So really powerful. That's a very, very, very strong example and metaphor in terms of ensuring that by providing help, you're not accidentally diminishing and disempowering and taking away control and accountability from those who are actually responsible. And then it's left nowhere. Everyone gets frustrated then. So just always remembering to hand the pen back. To put a bow on all of this before we move into the close, if you could tweet one provocative challenge to every SME leader in under 140 characters, what would it be?
Hmm. Well, we haven't talked about the easy action. And maybe what I would tweet is the path that is easy, the lazy path. What I would just be like, talk openly with your team about your accidental diminisher tendencies. It is the easy way. So you can ask more questions and give people space and give people 51%, give the pen back, look for people's native genius. But the most sustainable, scalable way to be a multiplier leader is to talk so openly about your accidental diminishing tendencies that other people stop you in real time. So let me set the high watermark on this. This is what good looks like. Good looks like you, it's not like you told them once, you talk about it all the time. People talk about your accidental diminisher tendencies. Like everyone knows I'm an idea fountain. They make fun of you about this. They tease you. They laugh at you about this because what happens is if this is just in the public domain and it's lighthearted and it's understood by all, and again, it's understood that you do it with really good intentions, then someone can stop you. So if I'm about to like call up Lauren, our head of research, and be like, Lauren, I was thinking we could do a study about this, da 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 da, and I think we, da, da, da. And she's like, okay, that sounds so interesting. Do you want me to stop the other studies that I'm working on to work on that? I'm like, of course not. I'm just, what did you say? You had this great term. I'm just like unloading my mind.
Yeah, just I need to do a brain dump. I just need to, yeah, I can't even recall now. Yeah, I just
Clearing my
a
mind
mind
or
dump. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. And she says, like, do you want me to stop and work on this? Or are you having an idea party right now? I'm like, it's an idea party. I admit it. And then she'll like party it up with me and we'll have fun talking about it. And then she doesn't do anything about it, which is actually the right solution. Or if everyone knows you're a rescuer and you step in to help at the final hour, it gives someone a chance to say, I've got it. Like, I'm going to get it done. The report will be on your desk. Like, I'm shipping it off to the client. It will be there tomorrow morning, 8 a.m.
as I listen to this, I am going to invite my own team to listen. And I think what we'll do, I'll ask them, but create, have a red card and a green card on the table for every meeting. And when they witness diminishing behavior from me, they can hold up the red card. So, and when it's multiplier behavior, well, then they can signal that it's multiplier behavior with a green card. That to me seems like a kind of tangible, practical way of certainly educating myself and others as to whether their behavior, which is well intentioned, is actually diminishing. I absolutely love this topic. It's for us in the context of the 10 principles of scaling, leveraging, being able to multiply and leverage the talent of your people is one way of delivering an outsized impact in terms of actually meeting your scaling ambition. So thank you for bringing your wonderful work to the world. I always close with the same question, and giving the fact that you have been in a company that's literally ubiquitous in terms of business lexicon article, and you're in the heart of Silicon Valley, tech scale-ups. Um, you you shared earlier you're a parent. Can you provide our listeners with three timeless takeaways?
Mm. Here's the thing I've learned studying the best and the worst leaders in the world. It's not about leadership, it's about contributorship. And I think what I have learned is that people come to work every day wanting to contribute 100% of their capability. And when they can, work is not exhausting, it's exhilarating. When they can't, it's exhausting and they disengage. But I think when we start our leadership from the assumption that people want to contribute fully, it puts us on the path to be a better leader. I guess number two, people want to be led, not managed. And I think number three might be that actually, whether we're in a leadership role or not, in any situation, I find that we have more power than we think we have. Sometimes we underestimate our power and it causes us to diminish. But if I've studied the most impactful contributors in the world, I find that they operate with the sense that they have more power than it seems they have, that you don't have to be in charge to take charge. That like our power tends to come from within rather than from our circumstance.
So much wisdom in all of that. So thank you, Liz. Looking ahead, what's next for you? You continue to deliver so much value to the world. We mentioned off air you're working on a couple of additional books at the moment, which is quite incredible. Can you share a little bit about that and what you're up to?
Yeah, I'm working on a project, a piece of research, and a book about really how leaders are made and what are the long-term consequences of people's first boss and how our formative experiences in the workplace shape us for years to come. So that's an interesting piece of research I'm working on. I'm teaching a new class at Stanford that's really about leading yourself, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Always new questions.
I love that. So our approach in our own program, our own 12-month accelerator program, is leading self first before you lead others, before you lead an organization. I'm curious, is there any latest thinking out there, given your work with your class in Stanford, in the context of leading self, kind of to deliver outsized returns? So what's coming up for you there whenever you're coaching and teaching around leading self?
Well, I'll share a bite from, I did a piece of research and it turned into this book called Impact Players. And it's the kind of book founders usually appreciate. Everyone's like, how do I hire people like this? But what I find that the most impactful people do is they don't tend to do their job. They do the job that's needed, which is a very different way of working. And I think as you're building a company, it can be easy to fall in the trap of workflows and processes and job descriptions. but like the vital work of a growing organization doesn't usually fit neatly in the org chart. It's all that messy stuff like, okay, we have an opportunity here. It's not his job, it's not her job, it's not this department's job. It's like it's that stuff that's in the middle. And we find that the impact players of the workplace, they do the job that's needed, which is a whole mentality and a way of working and a way of leading. It's not being limited by these artificial boundaries. But I would encourage people who are trying to grow companies to think about how do you build a culture where people don't just do their job, they do the job that's needed.
That's so powerful. Really, really powerful. Thank you. I'm glad I asked that. Liz, if anyone wants to find out more about your work and what you're up to, where best to connect with you?
Well, probably the best place to start is at thewisemangroup.com. And there's some stuff there about what we do as a team. There's also resources for all the various books. And occasionally I'll go out there and look at that. I'm like, oh, wow, these are good resources. Oh, like that's an interesting article. And I don't even remember having written it. I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess. But we've got a bunch out there that, people can use, a lot of free stuff that people can take and put the ideas from the research in the book into practice.
Well, Liz, look, I want to thank you for your incredible wisdom today, for sharing it with such humility and such wonderful clarity. As I said at the outset, if you haven't already read Multipliers, please go out and grab a copy. It's an incredible book. Liz, I wish you every success in everything that you're doing. I want to acknowledge and thank you for the value that you continue to bring to the world, and look, keep showing up as you do. It's wonderful, and we appreciate it. So thank you. Take care.
Well, right back at you.